Hi, everybody. This is week 2 on probation. We're doing this week's discussion, which is intensive versus standard probation. I think first we need to look at, I put some questions together having to do with this chapter that you have to read, this section you're doing, and I thought I would go over those. And the first one was, what is the most common sentence in the United States? Probation. Why? Why is probation so one of the most common? We have to remember the vast majority of our cases are pleas, and for a plea, to get a plea, very often people will do the pleas for the sole purpose of getting probation so they don't have to do jail time. And then I thought, what are the 3 basic services a probation agency provides to the courts? Well, it provides juvenile services because the juvenile services in a court are much different than other courts. A lot of them have diversion, so you never even actually go before a judge. You go to probation, and probation says, okay, what are we going to do here? What can we do to make you a better person? So you actually don't have a criminal record. You see the probation officer. The probation officer says, this is all hanging on your head. These are the things you need to do. And what's going to happen is if you don't do it, then you've got to go before the judge and you'll have a criminal record. The other thing is a pre-sentence report. And you're going to be just talking about that. Not everybody can be corrected. And so what happens in the probation report is they look at all of the factors that go into it, and they actually work with like a rubric, just like you work with a rubric, and they put in every bit of information they have. And from there they come up with what they feel is the correct amount of time for probation, or what the person should be having for probation. The probation officer answers very often to the judge. And so the judge, it's the ears and the eyes for the judge, and the judge makes a decision based on what that pre-sentence report says. And so it's very important for that pre-sentence report to be given to the judge. The next thing they have is community supervision. So probation does a lot of community supervision because they're again, eyes and ears to the court, saying, is this person doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing? Are they staying drug-free? Are they staying alcohol-free? Are they not beating on anybody? Are they staying out of places they shouldn't go? Are they working? There's the community supervision is a whole nother aspect of it. So now I ask you, as we're looking at this, we're all during COVID right at this moment. How much supervision is going on? I know a lot of people that are on probation right now, and what they're doing is they're getting a Zoom call to see if they're, doing what they're supposed to do instead of somebody going in the house. So how is that affecting probation right now? It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. The reason I know people that are on probation is because I make it a point to talk, hey, how you doing? People that I've known in the past, but I also know probation officers, and that's a lot of where my information comes from as well. And I said, what are you doing during this time? Well, we're doing Zoom calls. Well, so that's an interesting thing. The other thing was, what was the connection of John Augustus in probation? And remember, he saw that there was redeeming qualities in people, and if you work with them, they could go back into society. So this was in the decade before the Civil War. How is the practice of placing restrictions on who could be granted probation contrary to positive view? Well, it violated a basic tenet of positivism. I can never say that word, by the way. Judge the offender, not just the offense. So that's why you get that probation report. It's like, okay, can we judge the offender and see what we can do to work with this? What led to the spread of probation actually was juvenile reform. I mean, it started with juveniles, and how can we work with juvenile reform? And that started in Chicago in 1899. How do most states administer probation or parole? This is where I'm going to ask you to look up your state and see who does it. In our state, it's under the judicial branch. So I want you to look at that and see, where is your state doing it? Because it's done different by both. In about 3/4 of the states, it's done by the executive branch, and the other quarter is done. It's combined with parole. How do most populous states administer probation and parole? Each one's different. If you're in California, Illinois, there's a hint, New York and Texas, you're handled much differently. So what are the advantages of probation administered by the judicial branch? Well, I work in a state that it is done by the judicial branch, and so the judge makes a decision if there's going to be a plea. Now, as I said, the vast majority of all cases are pleas, and if the plea takes place, he's looking at that probation report saying, what can I do? And what is one of the real big reasons why probation is better than imprisonment? Well, number one, it costs 12 times less. That's a big one. 12 times less to be on probation versus being incarcerated. Number two, a person can become a productive member of society with someone helping them, supervising them, and working with them. So it's probation is much more responsive to the courts, and it provides services, and it can provide, drug testing, alcohol testing. There's a lot of things that probation can do that can actually work to reintegrate that person back into the court. The next thing that they talk about is what are the advantages of having probation administered on a statewide basis? Well, all of the correction subsystems are located in the executive branch. With executive branch placements, programs budgeting can be better coordinated. So it really comes down to money. Money, money rules everything, pretty much. So it comes down to money, better, use of your money. Now we talk about statutes limit of granting probation. I'm going to give you a case. It was my case. So I had a woman, and I want you to visualize this if this is your child. I had a woman who actually planned an abduction of a baby. She had not lived in our community for quite some time, but she came down. We had like a small festival every year. It was called the Taste of Westville. And she was looking for someone to be pregnant. And she found someone that was pregnant. And she befriended that person by going up and saying, do you remember me? I met you in the homeless shelter. This girl says, I really didn't remember her, except I vaguely remembered, and I had been in the homeless shelter, and so had my husband. And so, we got to talk, and we just talked different things. And she said, I really didn't think much of it. And she said, shortly thereafter, and she told me she was pregnant, and she looked pregnant. And shortly thereafter, this woman had her baby. This baby was, probably 6 weeks old when the baby was abducted. And a woman knocks on her daughter's house, and she says, "Remember me from the Taste? Well, I'm homeless now because my husband keeps beating me up." So the woman let her into the house, and she goes, "Well, you can stay here for one night." She says, "Because I felt bad about her being homeless." So she let her stay in the house. During the night, she stole the baby. Now, the only thing the woman knew about her was her first name and that she had a tattoo. Strange as it was, 7 years prior to that, I had dealt with a person who had that tattoo on her arm, and it just, I don't know, I don't remember a lot half the time, but I remembered that, and we were able to trace her. In working with other agencies, we were able to find her, and she had the baby. It was about 12 hours later. So she had this baby she had abducted. And to make it even more twisted, she had told her boyfriend that she had had her baby, and she went to the hospital. She pretended to have contractions. She went to the hospital. She had herself checked in, but she was checked in under medical mental. And then he called the hospital and said, "You can't come in. The baby's having withdrawals." There was some, drug addiction things going on. And then every day she'd leave her house and say, "I'm going to visit the baby. You can't visit him because you know, whatever reason." But she wouldn't let him. So then she showed up with this baby at the door. He felt it was his baby because she had pretended to be pregnant the whole time, including breaking a balloon of water in her belly before she left to have this fake baby that she never had. I told you it doesn't get much stranger than this. So, stranger abduction. If she had gotten away with it, she would have had this baby. She could have had this baby her whole life and then found out 18, 20 years later that it's not her, we could have found that this baby was with this woman. Because her criminal record only had one felony, how much time do you think she could get on the rubric? Where you put everything in and you look at the limits. The most amount of time she could have was 10 years in jail. This was such a planned abduction. She should have done more than 10 years. But so they ended up getting 10 years, but we had to find her record in Wisconsin. Now you say, well, couldn't you pull her query? Everybody thinks if you have a criminal offender that it follows you from state to state. Well, it really doesn't follow you from state to state. You don't always know. Some states don't put their criminal records into the national database. So we could not find that, but we found it because she'd made mention that she'd moved to Wisconsin. So I called Wisconsin and they pulled up her records there. And she had felony convictions there that could go against her. But that's how she got 10 years for a baby abduction. And as I said, she could have that baby forever and she still would have only gotten 10 years because they put everything in a scale and they decide, how many felonies has she had? How many arrests has she, look at her other convictions, and she didn't have a violent history, so she didn't deserve time, as the court said. So we had to show the court that she in fact did because we went over what the limits were, the standard was, and not by much, but enough where the court we had to show um, cause. Anyways, that was my little story of the day, and I wish you all well. If anybody has any questions, you can get a hold of me. I hope you all do well with this. If you have anything, let me know. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.